Hi, welcome to my podcast, Reclaim. I am your host, Thaís Sky. I have supported women navigate the complexities of being human for over 10 years. This podcast is where I disseminate some of those learnings and offer thoughts and guests to guide you into your healing. Welcome. Hello, friends. Thaís Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the podcast. This week I come to you to talk about emotional overwhelm. This is a topic that I briefly discussed on my Instagram stories, and when I asked you all if this is a topic that you would like to hear more about, you unanimously said, yes, please. And I think that makes sense. I think emotional overwhelm is a really common experience right now. And I want to talk about it and explore it and share some of my theories and ideas of why that is and what we can do about it. But first, some news. I am really I come with a lot of mixed feelings about this, but as many of you may or may not know, I am currently in the process of getting my hours to become a licensed psychotherapist. I am near the end. Right now, it looks like I will be done my hours in October, and then I will be able to submit them and start studying and then apply for my licensure exam. So fingers crossed, if all things go according to plan, by this time next year, I should be a licensed family and marriage therapist in the state of California. So I've been thinking a lot about how I want my 2021 to look like in terms of my business, and how many of you, go into January and February with really big ambitions for the year. I know I do. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I love the excitement of the new year and the energy and like, oh my gosh, all the things I want to create, all the things I want to do. And then when I reevaluated in March, I realized I think I bit a little bit off too much more than I can chew. And right now things feel like a lot. And the idea of adding more launches and adding more things beyond what I'm doing feels inaccessible to me. So in the heart, in honoring of emotional overwhelm, trying to figure out how do I run my business in a way that feels really sustainable for where I'm at in my life right now, it can be really hard to ask that question. And I bet you're probably struggling to find an answer to that question in different aspects of your life. Like, where are you continuing to push yourself, expecting yourself to be in a place that you are not, out of fear that if you don't push yourself and force yourself to be at that place, and it means something about where you are. It means that you're failing. It means that you aren't working hard enough. It means that you're not trying hard enough. And as someone who considers herself to be very ambitious, I strive to do my best and I want to give it my all. And if anyone were to accuse me of not giving it my all, I would take that deeply offensively. Because for me, being able to go above and beyond is a part of my brand. It's a part of who I am. And so to really come to terms with the fact of actually, I think I need to give myself permission to slow it down. I think I need to just be with what is here in front of me and tend to that in the best way possible and put a hold on everything else until 2022 felt really hard. And I really had to grapple with feeling like I'm a limited, broken human, because oftentimes feeling limited and feeling broken go hand in hand, but they're actually two different things, right? To be limited is to be human. We are all limited. We do not have an endless capacity for any one thing. We have limits, and limits are our friends. I talk about this in Worthy Women Rise quite extensively. We need to honor where we're limited, because those are our edges. Those are our places where we are invited to extend self-compassion and recognize that it is only when we can fully honor our limitations do we ever have hope of transcending them, if we even want to transcend them at that point. Because sometimes when we honor where we are, we realize, actually, I'm okay with where I'm at. I'm okay being here. I'm okay with this output. I'm okay with being in this place. So I'm saying all of that to say that I've decided I will not be launching the next cohort of Worthy Women Rise this year. And I will also not be doing a bunch of the other projects that I really wanted to do this year. I thought about doing workshops. I thought about doing smaller programs. There's a program on emotions that I have the whole program, just download it. It's all written down. It's all like in paper. I just have to now put it together and record it. And I've been wanting to do it for 2 years now. And I thought this is going to be the year that I'm going to create my emotions course. And it is not going to be the year. I'm simply tending to my year-long Worthy Womanized cohort that I'm running right now, and that ends in August. I'm loving up and being, giving my all to my one-on-one coaching, and I'm giving my all and giving my best to my mentorship. My group is full right now, but I do have spots in my one-on-one mentorship. So if you're interested in that, you can go to thaisguy.com/mentorship to learn more. But that's it. That is what I'm tending to right now. And it feels scary to say that. Again, because I think I should do more. And if I don't do more, and if I don't launch, and if I don't put myself out there in big ways all the time, then am I growing? And if I'm not growing, then am I dying? And if I'm dying, then does that mean that I am failing? And there's so much here to unpack, right, about the meaning of all these things. Why do we think that death is bad? Why do we think that growth is the only way to live? Why do we think that if we're not overextending ourselves and burning ourselves out, then we are not growing? I mean, there's so much here. And I think it ties perfectly into this topic that I bring to you all about emotional overwhelm, which is, when we find ourselves in a state where no matter how much we physically relax, no matter how much we do, we get away, we do a long weekend away or whatever, we come back and we're still not relaxed. When I Googled emotional overwhelm, there was a lot of different names for it: emotional exhaustion, empathy burnout, emotional burnout. And I found this to be interesting. It's like a list of general symptoms of emotional burnout. There's a lack of motivation, trouble sleeping, irritability, physical fatigue, feelings of hopelessness, absent-mindedness, apathy, headaches, change in appetite, nervousness, difficulty concentrating, irrational anger, increased cynicism or pessimism, sense of dread, and depression. And I don't think it surprises anyone, really, why right now we may be seeing an increase in emotional overwhelm. I think emotional overwhelm, I like to think of it kind of like finding a rhythm with our eating, right? We eat when we're hungry and then we stop when we're full. Ideally, that's the way it goes. There are natural breaks, right? But like, what if you were forced to sit at a table and just to eat and you had to eat and you couldn't stop eating? Obviously, you would get to the point where you feel really, really full and really disgustingly full. Well, I think of emotional overwhelm as like our ability to really process and digest what's happening in the world on an emotional level. And if we're continually getting fed so much stuff without appropriate amounts of breaks, without giving us the space to digest, it can lead to a sense of feeling really, really, really uncomfortably full, or in this case, emotionally overwhelmed. And the thing about emotional overwhelm that can be really difficult for people is that we often try to address emotional overwhelm the way we address physical overwhelm. We try to give ourselves rest, right? But just because you are resting your body does not mean that you are resting your emotions. It doesn't mean that you're resting your inner experience, because if you are resting, but you are battling with shame and guilt and you're watching TV, but your mind is running on what you could have done or should have done, or if you are, giving yourself space to nap, but then the minute you wake up, you're back to going a million miles an hour, thinking about God knows what you have to do tomorrow, or that one social encounter you had the other day. I mean, that's not resting, right? So emotional overwhelm requires a different attitude than physical rest. With physical rest, you just force your body to slow down and it will rest. But with emotional rest, it really requires an intention and a slowing down and a giving yourself permission to really unhook yourself from the expectations of being able to take everything on all the time and not reach a point where you're feeling burnt out. So what are the things in life that happen that contribute to emotional overwhelm? Well, we're currently living in the middle of a global pandemic. Like, I say that so sillily because I think we just keep forgetting and we keep thinking that life is normal, minus a few exceptions, right? Like, some things have changed, sure, but the pandemic has like kind of gone into the back of our minds. Like, it is what it is. It's not a big deal. No. It is a big deal. Our body is constantly trying to process what it means to be living in the midst of a pandemic. Now, the pandemic may have brought to you various other challenges, financial challenges, disconnection from relationships, family members, friends, proximity to people. It may have cost you your job. It may have changed your job so much that you don't like it. There's so much consequences to the pandemic that is just a part of our complex living experience that, of course, is going to result, if we don't give ourselves space to digest, emotional overwhelm. Now, that's just one. There's so much. If you have a high pressure job, of course, it's probably going to lead you to feeling emotionally exhausted, right? If you're pushing yourself into schooling, if you're working long hours, or you work at a job that you hate, or in an environment that feels really painful for you, if you're raising a baby, or if you have children and now you're the sole provider, and before you had daycare, now you're home and you had to quit your jobs. I mean, come on, there's so much going on right now. Financial stress is such a big one. We cannot underestimate the potency and the impact that financial stress can have on us. Being food insecure, being house insecure, any type of insecurity, all of this activates our nervous system. And then our nervous system stays activated and stays overwhelmed. And then what? How do we decompress from that? How do we, give ourselves space to be with ourselves? That is the question that we really need to be thinking about when we think about emotional overwhelm. Now, I have a theory about emotional exhaustion, emotional overwhelm that I want to offer you. This is a theory based on my kind of understanding of the world. I am sure that there are many holes in this theory that I'm not thinking of. And if you have any thoughts about this theory, I want to hear it. Tag me on Instagram. I am Thaís. Let me know your thoughts on this. But I also have a slightly different idea of emotional overwhelm or emotional exhaustion, emotional burnout, that I think may be interesting for us to think about. And it may help us make a little bit more sense of why we're experiencing it now more than ever. I think of emotions as relational. And this is something that I talk a lot about in my book, Reclaiming Worth. It's a free ebook I have on my website. You can go to thaissky.com/worth and grab that, or go to the show notes. I'll add it to the show notes too. And I talk about how the worthiness wound is a relational wound. And I build that argument by first talking about how the worthiness is an emotion. It's an experience of an emotion. The worthiness wound is an emotional wound, and emotions are relational. Now, what I mean by that is that emotions connect us to our relationship with things outside of us. It informs of how we are relating to a certain thing. We are in relationship with everything. We are in relationship with our jobs. We are in relationship with other people. We are in relationship with our sleep pattern, right? We are in constant relationship with all sorts of things. But predominantly, let's focus for a minute on other people. Our emotions tell us how we understand, how we are relating to, how we are experiencing the other person. It doesn't tell us what is happening. I hope I've drilled this in enough times over the years that I've had this podcast, is that emotions don't tell you what's actually happening. It is not a fact. It is not objective truth on reality. Emotions are a subjective internal experience based on our past and present coming together and informing us of what we think may be happening, given our lens, given the way that we understand and see the world. So our emotions are relational. They help us relate to other things. Without emotions, there could not be relationship with other people. There could not be intimacy. And so for those of us who hate our emotions, like me, who kind of grew up believing that like I was the emotional one, emotions are bad, they're too much, like I have to learn how to bring it down, like I feel too much, I'm too sensitive, etc. The cool thing about emotions is that they are what allows us to connect more deeply with others. And as a sensitive human, I'm actually more in tune to the experience of others. I can connect more with others than if I was completely shut out from my emotions. And I love that. I love my ability to connect with others and to be connected to others. And so, having said that, if emotions are relational, go along with this with me, okay? And we think of emotions as a way that we connect with other people, that we understand other people, that we are impacted by other people, then doesn't it make sense that emotional overwhelm is a sign that we are not that we're not healthily relating, right? It means that we are not digesting all of these emotional experiences that we're having. We're not able to be in relationships with people who are helping us make sense of things. We think that we have to hold it all by ourselves. Or another way of thinking about this is that we are we're either isolating ourselves more than ever, and we're not really processing what's happening with other people. And so we're holding it all ourselves. We're digesting everything by ourselves instead of, let's say, theoretically being in a group and thinking about something together. So isolation, lack of processing with other people, and or relationships that aren't really feeling like they're able to support you, like they're the type of relationships you want to be having. Okay, so let's slow it down. Let me talk about this in a continual way. When we are at a work environment that is in person, right? We're at an office. There are so many hundreds of relational moments that happen throughout a day that can help us process what is happening. For example, you're in a meeting with your best colleague, your best friend colleague, right? Your boss says something that really upsets you and upsets your colleague. You look at each other and you trade eye glances. That's a communication. That is somebody else helping you be in this emotional experience together. Now, when we're in person, when we're having these experiences, when we are around people, we are constantly having those types of relational dynamics, water cooler talk, where we're kind of processing and understanding. Now, sure, you may argue, yeah, but even in the office, like I had, Slack and I was chatting with people in other ways. It wasn't in person. That's true. But even if you walk down the hallway from somebody else and you say hi and you quickly chat about a meeting, that's more meaningful to our biology, to our neurology, than a Slack chat. Because with in person, you see the body language, you feel the warmth of the other human. Like there's something about being in proximity to other humans that is very restorative to us, even if we're introverts. And I have this whole theory about introversion that I shared 2 episodes ago. Again, this is my own theory, but I think a lot of us identify as introverted, but really we have relational trauma. We were never taught how to really use relationships and be in relationships with people in the way that could help us process and understand things. So, of course, we're not going to feel restored by relationships if we have so much social anxiety or we feel so uncomfortable around people because of the ways that we grew up, because of the ways that we were related to. And I think we use the word introversion as a catch-all to kind of explain why other people don't feel safe. But I actually think that there's many reasons why we may not feel safe with people, and it may not have anything to do with introversion and extroversion. So that's the theory. So when we move from being in office and having these kind of small relational moments where we feel like we are with people, even if they're not our best friends, even if we don't really like our colleagues, to then go virtual may have some alleviation. Oh my gosh, thank God. Like now I don't have to get all dressed up. Now I don't have to deal with Bob from accounting, right? Like now I don't have to like have these awkward social interactions with colleagues. Like, oh, thank God. Those things are so exhausting. You may notice that now you may feel more alone in your work experience. You may feel a little bit more isolated. You may feel like you don't really know what's going on as much as you did. You may feel removed in some way and isolated in some ways. And my argument is that that leads more quickly to emotional overwhelm, because we now feel like we have to process and digest this huge meal by ourselves instead of being with other people that can help us process and digest this meal together. And so the reason why I think is that there's so much more emotional overwhelm happening right now is not just because of the pandemic, though obviously that's a huge activator, but because the pandemic has forced us to be more in isolation. It has removed us from these vital connections that we have with people. Right? As much as we were careful and we wear masks, like there's something really important that we're missing by not being able to gather around a dinner table and talk with friends. And if you're gathering around a dinner table right now with friends, I wonder if there is some part of you that's anxious about the coronavirus, and that may also be interfering with your ability to really connect with other people. So the argument I'm trying to make is that emotional overwhelm is not just a lot of really hard things happening to you, but our ability to actually process all those things. And what helps us in the processing, I'm not saying it's like the foolproof plan, like if you feel isolated, don't isolate and you won't experience emotional overwhelm. No, what I'm simply suggesting is that isolating can augment emotional overwhelm or facilitate it or make it faster. And part of what we're craving when we're emotionally overwhelmed is to be in relationship with meaningful people that can help us process and digest these experiences. I think we live in a culture that tells us that we have to make sense of a lot of things by ourselves. I certainly grew up in an environment where I felt like I had to make sense of a lot of things by myself. By that, I mean like my inner world. I had to make sense of why I was feeling certain things and what I was feeling by myself. And kids don't usually have the tools to know how to do that. And so they find the tools that they do, they use the tools that they do know, like compartmentalize and minimize, and whatever tools they're learning from their parents, whatever their parents are modeling to them, that's what the kid generally does. If the parent's not helping the child make sense of his internal world, odds are that parent is probably modeling that the inner world isn't important, or that it's more important to think about the adult, the caregiver's inner world than the child's inner world. So I learned that I had to make sense of a lot of really big things by myself. And it has taken me a long time in my healing journey to think about the ways in which I don't feel safe in relationships because I'm scared to be in relationship with people and have them reject me, right? And have them not like me, have them turn away from me. And so I would much rather isolate myself and not have friends, and not rely on other people than to rely on people and have them let me down. And so for me, learning about emotional overwhelm and thinking about like what it means to connect, it's invited me to really reflect on the ways in which I want to undo some of the things I've learned about relationships. And I actually would like to learn how to be in a type of relationships where I get to make sense of things with people. I want to be in a type of relationships that can hold all of my complexity. And I want to be able to hold the complexity of other people. I want to be able to be in the kind of relationships where we get to be in the mess together. And that means that I have to go first. That means I have to use the inner work that I've been doing to learn how to hold space for other people and their complexity, and to practice putting myself out there and to name it and to be in the discomfort of it with other people. Okay. So, the hard thing may be that if you're experiencing emotional overwhelm, is you may be saying, yeah, but like, I don't have anybody around me. I don't have people I can really go to for emotional support. And I hear you. And, that is a really common experience because of the way I think we have structured our world, and we have kind of perpetuated a cycle that like we shouldn't need people and we should be on our own and we should be able to figure stuff out by ourselves, like that hyper individualism. But I think you're actually underestimating or overestimating, whichever one, the people that are around you and the people that are there and do care. And it doesn't mean that you have to now use your friends as therapists. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is it's when you're able to go like on a hike with a friend and talk about the pandemic, and be in a shared experience of talking about the pandemic together, now you're in the process of digesting this really big thing with somebody else. If you're going through a breakup and you talk about it with, your friends, you're now processing it and digesting it with people instead of dealing with this heartbreak all by yourself. So I'm not saying use your friends as therapists. I'm saying get a therapist, right? Like I'm not saying that your friends now have to hold the weight of all of your emotional problems. I am saying is that the people around you are going through their emotional problems too. And how can we be in it together? And how can we be a little bit more transparent about our experience instead of keeping it all inside? Because if we don't keep it all inside, then it means that we're incompetent in some way, or we're not strong enough, or we're supposed to project some type of strength. We're supposed to project some type of, I got it all together. Like what would happen if we were to just be a little bit more honest together? And I guess the other thing that I'm inviting is like, particularly right now, while things feel so isolating, how can you make an effort? And it may mean really making an effort. It may mean really doing uncomfortable things, but how can you find ways that you can surround yourself with people in a way that feels really nourishing for you, whether that's a weekly group hike, whether that's signing up for an improv class on Zoom, whether that is, picking up an instrument and like getting a music teacher. I don't know. There's so many options. There's so many ideas. There's so many groups out there. And it doesn't have to be in person for it to be nourishing. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to break any of whatever rules you have around the pandemic. It doesn't have to break that. We can find things that work for us. When I Google emotional overwhelm and I look at like what people recommend doing, all of it is the same. It's like eat healthy and exercise and meditate and make sure that you get enough sleep and all of these things that I know are really both basic and both important, but I don't think that they really get to the heart of it because I don't know. I think most of us are really doing the best that we can with the amount of sleep that we're getting, and we're doing the best that we can with the amount of exercise we're getting. And like trying to now add more to it is just going to add to our perfectionism, and it's just going to add to like our inner critic's argument that we're not doing enough, more than it's going to help with our emotional overwhelm. So if you tried those things and those things didn't work, see if something like what I'm suggesting will work. See what it could look like to reach out more to the people in your life, because I bet you that they probably want you to reach out. They want to reach out too. I think we all need each other, and we're all trying to do this in a very isolated, I don't need anybody way, but I think we actually very much need each other. And I think it's hard to need each other. And I think it brings up a lot of our, ideas of relationshiping. And I know that this is hard. And I talk about relationships in almost every single one of my sessions because it's at the heart of so much of our dilemma and our experiences of life. And it's why we have such complicated emotions, right? Like if we think about all of the big moments in our lives, they all stirred up really big emotions. That's what made the event so big, was the emotions that it got stirred up. Emotions are really important, and addressing emotional overwhelm is really important. And so if you don't feel like you have anybody, truly don't feel like you have anybody, I hope that you consider working with somebody, a healer, a coach, a teacher, a therapist. I mean, whoever is within financial accessibility for you. There are so many resources online and availabilities. There's sliding scales. There's, clinics, low-cost clinics. There are so many places where you can get support. There are apps. I mean, there's all sorts of options. I know it's not enough, and I know it needs to be better, but there are options right now if you really look for it. Okay. So, I record this episode because, of course, I'm experiencing emotional overwhelm too. And that's why I made the decision to not launch anything, to not create anything new this year, to nourish what I have in front of me. And that's a part of emotional overwhelm too, is really looking at what is on your plate that doesn't have to be on your plate, and then what pressure you're putting on yourself to add to your plate that isn't necessary. Like, do you need to have so much pressure on yourself? Is my business really going to implode? Is it going to disappear if I don't launch one year? I mean, I really don't think so. I think I've built something really sustainable, and I think I can allow myself to not put so much pressure on myself and really let this journey be this journey. That's a really important part of it. However much we're adding on to ourselves, it's not helping. It's like an overworked train who's already going as fast as possible, and you keep adding more coal, right? Hoping that it'll go faster and faster, but it usually doesn't make it go faster and faster. It just strains the parts that are already strained. Eventually something's going to snap, something's going to break. And I think so much of our emotional overwhelm is this pressure to think that we have to be different, we have to be better, we have to be faster, we have to do more. And you don't. Let this be your permission slip. You don't have to do more right now. If you're experiencing emotional overwhelm, it means that there's something that needs to change, not an invitation to keep going in the pace that you've been going. Clearly, the pace that you've been going is not working if it's leading you here, right? If it's led you here. That's it, right? And there's nothing, there's no need to judge your pace, or there's no need to go into like, I'm bad or broken. Like, sometimes overwhelm just does happen. Like, we're doing all the things, it's all exciting, and then at some point, boom, overwhelm. Doesn't mean that you're bad or broken for reaching emotional overwhelm. It does mean, though, that something needs to change. And you are allowed to make that change so that you can find a new pace that feels sustainable for you right now. And then who knows what happens in the future. I know that I have big plans for 2022. I know that I want to write a book. I know that I want to do a shorter 5-month Worthy Women Rise and a year-long Worthy Women Rise. I know I want to do those two things in 2022. And I know that I want to do my emotions course. I don't know if that will happen in 2022, but I know that I have lots of goals and plans and ambitions, and I'm not going to take those things away. They're still there and they're going to happen. It just doesn't all need to happen right now. We can lean into the trust that everything is going to happen at the right time. But can we not race to just die, please? Right? Can we take care of our internal landscape? Can we give ourselves the emotional rest that we need by taking off the pressure and finding places to relate and places to connect with people and things that we love to do? Find more space and time to do things that we love. Can we please do that right now? Because we really need that right now. And I'm really a big fan of you finding whatever that is in your life right now. Okay, well, I hope that this was helpful, useful. I obviously have a lot more to think about when it comes to this theory, but I'm a really big fan of it. I think that there's something here about not feeling the need to be alone in this that may be really, really good to lean into and practice and see how it lands for you. Like I said, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on Instagram at I am Thaís Sky, and I will see you all next week.